This week, I want to cover my favorite free remote play applications for the Steam Deck. So all of these are going to require you to have either a PC, an Xbox, or a PlayStation, and you will be remote accessing those to play the games. So with how big games are getting and how hard they are to run, and with how old the Steam Deck is, this is a fantastic way to use your Steam Deck. So the first one's going to be Steam Link. This is Steam's remote play feature. This allows you to play Steam games on your PC and then remote play them onto your Steam Deck. It allows you to get much better frame rates because it's rendering on a more powerful PC, and then the data is getting sent to your Steam Deck over your local area network. The next is going to be Moonlight. This can also access Steam games as well, but this basically allows you to access your full PC. You can do anything on your PC that you'd be able to do just with your Steam Deck. So it's remote accessing the whole PC, which allows you to launch stuff like Battle.net, as well as like all of the Xbox Game Pass games as well, and various other launchers. Next up is going to be Chiaki. This is going to be for PlayStation and will allow you to play all of your PlayStation games remotely on your Steam Deck. And finally, we have Greenlight, which will do the same thing but for Xbox. Now, the most important thing with remote play for me is going to be low latency. So in order to make this video, I had to come up with a way to test for latency on each of these applications. And what I ended up coming up with was using two identical capture cards. So I have two Elgato 4K 60 Pros MK2s, and I had both of those in the same system, and then I attached the host system to one of the capture cards and then the remote play system to the other capture card, and I set it up so that you can see them side by side. And initially I wasn't sure if this would work, so my first test and my proof of concept was with my PlayStation 5 and my PS4 Pro. And here you can see on the left is my PS5 and on the right is my PS4 Pro, and you can actually see the latency right now in real time. So we're remote playing the PS5 with the PS4 Pro, and you can actually see it in real time here. And the way that I did this testing was with aiming down sight on the sniper rifle, and then we go frame by frame. So you can see that what just popped up on the left was hold L3 focus, and basically that is going to be our cue. So we go back one frame, it disappears, and then we're going to go forward. You can see it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to count the number of frames on the right side to see how long it takes the PS4 Pro to catch up. So we're going to count these out. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4, we see hold L3 focus. So that means it took 4 frames for the PS4 Pro to end up getting the same image that the PS5 had. So that means we are dealing with a good amount of latency. We're going to end up seeing 4 frames of latency. And again, we're going to do this again. We're going to set up. You can see the lag in real time. And again, we're going to slow down frame by frame, wait for the L3. We see that on the left. And then on the right side, we will count the frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, we're 4 frames slow, and that's going to equate to about 67 milliseconds of latency. And both of these systems are connected via Ethernet to my router. So they're as good as they could be. So let's take a look at what this setup looks like when we don't have both of them attached via Ethernet and we have one of them or both of them using Wi-Fi instead. As we can see from the results, these are probably not the most typical results you're going to see, and this is in big part due to just the limitations of my testing. I had to be close enough to my router to both use the Ethernet cord and do the Wi-Fi testing while still being close enough to the PC that had 2 capture cards. So the logistics of my testing, I ended up being like 2 feet away from my router. So it's a best case scenario for all of the Wi-Fi results here. And I think that if you actually are in a typical setting in a house where there are some walls between you and your Wi-Fi, you will see worse results than this. But I'm just reporting on the results I got. And when you are that close to your Wi-Fi and your router, you end up having the exact same results, whether you are using an Ethernet cord or if both the host and remote play system are operating over Wi-Fi. So throughout the testing that I did with the Steam Deck, I did it with the host device connected via Ethernet as well as over Wi-Fi, and I saw no difference in these results. And again, it's probably just how close I was to my router. That being said, we can still compare these applications against each other, and we can see that we have the frame count and then we have the latency in milliseconds. So with the PS5 and Chiaki, we end up seeing a frame count of 5 between when the host device ends up seeing a frame versus when the Steam Deck does, and that equates to about 83 milliseconds of latency. This is really bad. It does not feel good to play. And overall, this is basically almost an unplayable experience. Moonlight is a little bit better. We end up seeing 4 frame count, so that's about 67 milliseconds of latency. That being said, you have to keep in mind that this is all at 720p with 60 FPS. So Moonlight does have the ability to play at 90 FPS, which would give you better latency than we are seeing here. Greenlight has fantastic results. It ends up being 3 frames, which equals 50 milliseconds of latency. And Steam Link has the best at 2 frames, which ends up giving you 33 milliseconds of latency. And that one is definitely going to be the most responsive and the best experience. Now we have a chart that I ended up making, and this is going to be in part the latency data, which is stuff that's replicatable, and then also just my opinions. So basically I came up with a bunch of different metrics for measuring which of these is the best and worst. And the things that I included are latency, connection quality, image quality, game feel, and then some miscellaneous stuff are how easy it is to install and update, different settings and features that it has, controller setup, how the controller interacts with the interface, and then how the controller is in gaming. And when I was weighting each of these for most important and least important, I ended up saying that the latency, connection quality, image quality, and game feel are 90% out of 100. So those are the majority of what you're going to get for the rankings. And then the miscellaneous items comprise 10. So latency is the most important thing to me. I say that that's 30%. Connection quality is 25%. And the difference between latency and connection quality is you can have a real low latency experience, but the connection might be like a little stuttery, like little dropouts every once in a while, and that is going to impact your overall experience. Image quality is super important because if you have real low latency and really good connection quality, but the game looks like mud, it doesn't matter. And then game feel is kind of the culmination of those 3. So it's like, how does the game feel to play on the Steam Deck when you are using each of these applications? So Chiaki, no surprise here, that one has the lowest score, and it's because of how heavily I weight latency, connection quality, image quality, and game feel. This one has such bad latency that I gave it a 0 out of 15 on game feel, and it's just because it feels so bad to play because of the latency. So the way that I demerited things for latency is for every 1 frame that it was slow, it gets 5 points deducted. Chiaki had 5 frames slow, so it lost 25 points right there. Connection quality is pretty average. It's kind of like all of the other ones. So I ended up giving that 15 out of 25. It's not the greatest. You know, every once in a while, I'll see a little hitch every once in a while. Image quality, this one, again, it's like a console, so it's going to be worse than something like Moonlight or Steam Link, but I gave it a 10 out of 20. It's about the same as the Xbox. And then, yeah, like I said, game feel, I ended up giving it a 0 out of 15 because it just feels so bad to play on. When it comes to install and update, you can use the Discover application inside of the Steam OS to get it installed. And yeah, it works well, doesn't have any issues there. Settings and features, it is better than something like Greenlight, but it's still not anywhere near as feature rich as something like Moonlight or Steam Link. And then controller setup, I ended up demeriting 1 point just because it's a little bit harder because you have to end up having it match like a DualSense Edge. So you have to do some stuff with the touchpad to make it like a touchpad on a DualSense Edge. And you have to map some stuff for the PlayStation button. And then once you actually do that, and then you're in like the PlayStation 5 interface, it works perfectly. And when you're in game, you're able to use the touchpad like it was a DualSense Edge. So that is fantastic. Moonlight, this one, again, if we were running at 90 FPS, Moonlight would feel way better and it would be better than Greenlight on this list. But all of this was done at 60 FPS for fairness and 720p, which is another thing where Moonlight ends up having an advantage because Moonlight can actually run at 800p, and it is the only one of these applications that allows you to do that. So you can do 90 FPS at 800p, and the closest thing that gets to that would be like Steam Link, which can do 720p at 90 FPS as well. But when we take a look at the results, it ended up having 4 dropped frames, so I ended up taking 20 points off of it for latency, so it ended up being 10 out of 30. Connection quality, again, about the same as the PlayStation 5. Image quality is a little bit better than the PlayStation 5, so that ended up being 15 out of 20. And then game feel, again, at 60 FPS, it's like a 5 out of 15. It's not the greatest experience, And again, once you put it at 90 FPS, it does feel better than Greenlight. But when we were doing an apples to apples comparison, it's arguably worse when you're at 60 FPS. As far as miscellaneous stuff goes, it is the worst when it comes to installs and updates. It doesn't have like auto update and stuff like that, and you have to do it on 2 different machines. So it is not as easy there. That being said, like I said, it does have the best settings and features because it does allow you to push high frame rates while using the full 800p of the Steam Deck screen. So you can basically get the most out of your Steam Deck OLED. And then when it comes to the controller setup, you don't really have to do anything, but I did ding it a point on using the controller in the interface because, again, you're trying to use a Steam Deck with Steam Deck controls to basically maneuver through a Windows PC. So there's just a lot of learning curves for what you can do and how to like do different things in Windows with the Steam controls. And not everybody's going to be like okay with that or be able to figure that out in a quick manner. But once you're in game, the controls work just fine. The Greenlight results really surprised me. The last time I had used this before they had updated it, it was horrible, man. It had terrible latency. It was definitely worse than Chiaki. And whoever is like doing stuff for that application is doing a fantastic job. It is so much better than the last time I used it. The latency was fantastic. It only dropped 3 frames, so it only got 15 points deducted there. And then connection quality, again, is about the same as the Chiaki and Moonlight results. Image quality is about the same as Chiaki, not super great. Game feel is a lot better. It's 10 out of 15, and that is because of the latency being so low and it just feeling responsive. And then the install and updates, I ended up dinging 1 point on it because it is like a little weird. There's a way to do it through Discover, but I wasn't able to do that, so I ended up having to do it in a much more complicated way. If Discover works for you and you can just download that from the Steam desktop mode, then it's not going to be that hard, but I was just having issues when I was doing my testing, so I just demerited a point for that. Settings and features, it has the worst settings and features, so you can barely do anything to like change any of the image quality or anything like that, so it ended up getting 1 out of 4 there. And then controller setup, kind of similar to the PlayStation. You have to do some stuff. You also have to kind of use like the touch functionality of the touchscreen to navigate some of the menus, which I didn't really like, so I took a point off there. But once you're actually in the Xbox interface, it works great, and the controller works well in gaming. And finally, the golden goose, Steam Link, man. Steam Link is so good. I was never using Steam Link. I religiously used Moonlight until I did this testing, and I realized that Steam Link is the GOAT, man. It has the best latency, the best connection quality, equal image quality to Moonlight. It has fantastic game feel, and yeah, you don't have to install or update it because it's just native on Steam and it's native on the Steam Deck. The settings and features, I dinged 1 point because it can only go up to 720p instead of 800p. Controller setup, you don't have to do anything because, again, it's a Steam Deck. It navigates Steam just fine. And then using it in the interface and using it in gaming is perfectly acceptable, and I have no issues with it. And again, it's also capable of driving higher frame rates. So this is the current rankings when we're talking about 60 FPS. But if we're actually talking about being able to play at higher than 60 FPS, which only Moonlight and Steam Link can do, I would give them both easily an extra 10 points on top of these scores because having a higher frame rate can overcome a ton of the latency feeling things that you get with remote play. So overall, I was really happy to do this testing. It was really interesting to me to end up seeing this. Like before I did this testing, the 2 that I used the most were Chiaki and Moonlight. And Chiaki I mainly just used because there's some PlayStation exclusives that I just wanted to play on my handheld. And I just don't understand how the latency is that bad when they produce something like the PlayStation Portal. Like they literally have a device whose whole job is to remote play PlayStation games onto a device, and their latency is horrible. So I don't know what exactly is going on there. They definitely have a lot to work to do because Greenlight used to be worse than Chiaki, and over the past few updates that they've done, it is so good now. It is such a good contender, especially at 60 FPS. And then, like I said, Moonlight is going to just have a special place in my heart just because it can actually drive high frame rates while filling out that full 800p screen and allowing me to play games that are on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which I know you can import those games to Steam, but it's kind of a lot of a hassle. And for me, it's just easier to use Moonlight for those games. But if I have a game that is on Steam, I will 100% be using Steam Link because it is by far the best for playing Steam games. That's all I've got for this one. The video that I'm going to go over next week is going to be over an Asus motherboard that I think is just a terrible product that you really shouldn't buy because it's essentially just a product that they renamed, and it's pretty anti-consumer because it was a bad product and then they renamed it and now it's much harder to find reviews about the product you're buying. I just really don't agree with that business move. I bought the motherboard not knowing that it was as bad as it is, so I just want to like kind of put awareness out there so that people know what to search for when they're looking up this motherboard. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week.